Memphis was still somewhat stuck in a time warp. We sort of had this complex about being the place that Dr. King was killed, but at the same time, and wanting to move beyond that, but at the same time, not willing to really expand and offer new opportunities for inclusion. Memphis was at a point to where there was a lot of internal strife taking place. Racial tensions were somewhat high, and basically, while we were post civil rights era, we still had not moved as some other communities had to become a more unified and diverse community. It was still a city where basically most of the lower tier work and workers were African American, and very few opportunities existed in a real sense for those who had advanced skills.
Why is that? Is that is it just an easy of an answer of just patent racism, or do you think it was? Do you think there's something more to it than that?
Well,
Is it a little more complex?
yeah, I think it's racism, but I think there's more to it than that. I think that there's a historical context in Memphis's sort of history, in that Memphis has been sort of the beacon for folk who have come with limited education and skill from the Delta area, both black and white. And so given that the educational process has not been sort of what it could have been, then you've had this mass of people who, for better or for worse, who have not been prepared to take advantage of emerging industries and emerging opportunities. And the feeling was that this was sort of endemic to all African Americans. And occasionally there were exceptions, but for the most part, most African Americans were not viewed as being management or leadership material. So that it had a preparation overlay along with historical racial attitudes, coupled with the fact that Memphis itself had sort of made some decisions that long term, I think we're now beginning to pay the consequences of. As I like to say, cities are like sporting events. Everybody's going to have a run, and when you have your opportunity, you better capitalize on it, because the opposition is going to presumably do it when they have their opportunity. We had something called the Jobs Conference. And the Jobs Conference was where then Governor Lamar Alexander agreed that Memphis historically had not necessarily received the attention and maybe some of the funding that it should have received. And he suggested that we come together in Memphis and to come up with some ideas about how the state could be a partner with us to improve that situation. And something was held called the Jobs Conference here. And the Jobs Conference brought together business leaders, political figures, leaders in education to determine what Memphis wanted to be and do, and how we were going to ask the state to help us. And out of that process, came 4 projects, and the governor had said that he would try to make available $20 million to address those projects. At the time, a large amount of money to help Memphis move in that direction. And Memphis decided that its 4 projects were going to be Beale Street, the Agri Center, the Orpheum, and a convention center hotel. Now, on the surface, you could say, well, we've done well, and all of those have actually come to fruition, and they've helped facilitate Memphis's growth. And that's true. But as a part of that decision, we literally made the decision for Memphis for the next 20 years to 30 years that Memphis was going to be a city that was going to focus on tourism, agribusiness, and distribution. One can argue that obviously FedEx has been very successful, distribution, Beale Street has been very successful, Graceland, tourism, and one can argue that being in the center of the Delta, agribusiness was logical and made sense. But the other side of that is that all of those industries are low wage, low skill occupations. And when we bet the farm on those as our future, we in some ways sort of pull back from investing in both the educational preparedness and the investment to attract the industries that wanted higher skill levels and would pay higher wages. So here we sort of made a decision, and we made it based upon assets. I understand. Our assets at the time were those. But we made a decision that was 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. 79, to 2009 was 40 years. That is still coloring what this community is. We now complain about our lack of being able to find a skilled workforce. We didn't invest in education the way we would have if we had decided that what we wanted to do was to point toward high-tech and high-skill industries. We did not have them, but we did not envision them either. So that, here we are today, and we have an environment where Memphis is the poorest city in America, where we lament the fact that we can't get a skilled workforce for industries, where the industries that we're able to attract, because our workforce is not skilled, are industries that basically do not depend upon a high level of skill or education, which means that they generally do not pay high wages. And with the exception of the biomedical sort of area, we have this sort of economy that basically reflects that choice. I only bring that up not to be hindsighted, although that decision still continues to plague us to this day, but to say as we look toward the future, we have to be very careful about how we shape what we want Memphis to become, and it cannot just be shaped upon present assets, that we have to envision beyond where we are. And that's the planner in me that's saying, city plans are 20 and 30 years into the future. You can't base what Memphis of 2050 is going to be based upon what Memphis of 2014 is, because certain things are going to evolve that are going to cause us, if we want to be competitive with other communities, to have to adapt. And we're realizing now that we're going to have to invest more in education. We're going to have to raise the skill level of our citizens. We're going to have to address the poverty issue that has come about basically because of decades of low wages. We've got to be very purposeful about addressing that moving forward. Back to your original question about is it all race? No, it is not today all race, but race is still a major factor in it. The bigger issue is inclusion and opportunity. We do not have the citizens being educated at a high enough skill level to attract high skilled jobs, which will pay a wage, which will transition our folk from the poverty level to a higher level of and standard of living. But it also, let's be honest about it, reflected what we were, what we had. That was our advantage in the marketplace. And indeed, to some degree, we're still trying to convince industry to move here because of our low wages, which I find to be quite interesting. And our low cost of living, which is great. But, a low cost of living is low partly because the wages you pay only will sustain a certain level of expense. And so while on the one hand you attract people to an area because you have a low cost of living, on the other hand, it also is indicative of the level of poverty that you have. And those areas that are generally very low cost living areas are also areas that have very low wages. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a mentality that is addressed with agribusiness and with tourism and with distribution that basically implies that, those persons don't need to be highly educated. You don't want them to be because you don't see a need to pay for that skill level. And so that to me is sort of something that we've got to get from behind very quickly. But I think you have to do both. I think that, first of all, you have to create an environment where the skill level that your people have now, you have to create jobs for them where they are. But you have to prepare their children in the next generation for what you presume to be a higher skill level job so that they elevate into a higher quality of life. But you clearly have to give people an opportunity to be productive, contributing members of your community right now based upon what they're able to offer. And if you have a low-skilled population, then you've got to find ways of creating jobs where they can at least have a quality of life that allows them to basically provide for the needs of their families, while at the same time you're trying to create an educational situation where their kids are getting a better level of preparedness for the high-skilled jobs of tomorrow.